I've accumulated so many ideas for practicing this piece, over 100 actually, so I created this practice edition with all my exercises and fingering suggestions in a PDF file with a clickable table of contents you can download in the description. Going through all of that in this video is just not practical, so what I'll do here is show you those things I found most useful and whatever I think needs demonstration. For the opening I use a very particular technique which I'll show you in detail, but first a little preparatory exercise. You might also take a look at Scriabin's first etude from the Opus 8 set. It uses a similar technique, and it also happens to be in C# major. And now to the method I mentioned. Here's a series of progressive exercises that lead to it. Specifically, the problem are the repeated chords. The motion I use is one of a kind of double action, where the first chord is struck with the wrist coming downwards, as if to swipe a card off a table. I'm massively exaggerating the movement here. In its final stage, it's almost impossible to see. Although you're using the arm to play the second chord, there should be no deliberate sensation of pushing the arm down. Ideally, it feels as if the second chord is struck accidentally or just caught on the way back. When it works at its best, the second chord comes without any deliberate action or intent. At first, we will try and keep our fingers as loose as possible. Let them give in to pressure. I know that's not ideal, but it's best to first become familiar with the larger arm and wrist motions. And when you can play it like this, with loose fingers, then you'll be in a great position to add control by engaging the fingers. So to start off with, we're just going to practice this movement without the second chord. So we're just going to play the passage in triplets. Really exaggerate the movement, so we're doing much more arm and wrist movement than we need. And play it with the melody as well, so you get used to it. It can also be very useful to play it at a much greater speed. It gives you a better picture of the whole melody. Next we deal with the repeated chords. Basically think in out, and then we add the A, and gradually increase the speed. You can also practice the reverse. The next stage is to close the gap, so we have continuous triplets. Next, we're still doing triplets, but we're also going to play the repeated chord, but twice the speed, making it much faster than we'll need it in the end. This one I found especially helpful. You can also practice it just playing the A's as quietly as you can. That's the one that tends to be too loud. Or you can just touch the keys silently. Very difficult. Gieseking suggested that you group it into 2 groups of 3 and 1 group of 2, as you see here. I did not find that very useful myself, but by all means try it. I found much better to do it in this way, starting with a group of 2 and then 2 groups of 3, with an accent on the beginning of the groups of 3. I wrote it out this way about the first page in the practice edition, because it takes quite a lot of mental gymnastics to play it this way. Another very helpful exercise is to practice it playing everything as you would, but only touching the keys of the melody. That way you can really listen to all the little kinks in the right hand that tend to go wrong while you're playing the melody. Another massive problem with this opening section is the very first few notes that you play. I really don't want to start with a big accent, or start slowly and then progressively get into it. Ideally, I'd like it to sound like it's just there immediately. There are a few ways we can practice that, and here's the best of those that I found. So place your hand on the keys and start engaging them in very small motions without actually playing anything. And then you just allow us to hear it. In bars 14 and 15, I strongly recommend using this alternative hand distribution. I quite enjoyed practicing this exercise too. Here too, playing the left hand silently is very useful. You can also try it the other way around. I just want to emphasize practicing it in chords. It forces you to think about it in terms of hand positions, and I think a great many of the difficulties here come down to finding a comfortable hand position, or more precisely, a comfortable motion between hand positions. Or how about upper semitone? It's very difficult. On this section I'm going to show you some standard evenness exercises besides rhythmic alterations that I like to use in many places. As you can see, it comes nicely in groups of 4, where each group of 4 is typically also a hand position, and we're going to take the first 2 out of the group of 4 and play them more often. And you can also combine that nicely with rhythmic alterations. Then we take the next 2 and do the same and go through all of them. After that we take the first 3. And eventually the entire group. Specifically for practicing the transitions, leave out the thumb, and in this case you wind up with triplets. Practice the passage as if that's how it's written. In order to separate melody voices from accompaniment like this, you can offset them a little bit. That helps you both technically and mentally to think of them as separate voices going on. This run lends itself nicely to show some other things about evenness that I like to do. Here too we think in terms of hand positions, and we simply change the order of the notes within each hand position. Here for example I just reversed it. Ideally aim to have the transition from one position to another to go as smoothly as you would normally want to do it. In this passage I found very useful to go back and forth between very small sections of it. You can vary them a little bit according to your needs. Here I use this fingering for the repeated notes, and if you do that then this exercise will help. Here's a hand distribution that I really like. Start off here using the right hand, this is normal still, and then you play these 3 with the left hand. So we have all black keys left hand, all white keys right hand. That's very nice. You can also just go back and forth like this. Play the left hand in chords and have the right hand in triplets so you can go back and forth. I use this slightly crazy hand distribution here, but it really only winds up leaving one particular difficulty, and that's transitioning in the left hand coming down. But the good news is that if you play it rhythmically precisely as written, you don't have to, but if you do, then the right hand would come exactly between that transition. And now our beloved double note section. I'll show it to you here an octave lower. Also check out my video on the Chopin Etude in thirds with plenty more exercises. Take a look at the fingering I use in the left hand in the arpeggio coming down here. One way you might be able to make this passage easier, and also sound better, is by emphasizing the melody notes by just playing them a bit longer. By not also doing that in the left hand, you're still keeping it flowing, so it doesn't sound like you're starting and stopping. Going back and forth, and always adding a note. Of course the rhythmic distribution is different here, but it's not that much different. And it can also be helpful to do the same thing in reverse. This is still the first arpeggio, the one where the hands are coming in, and we're starting at the end of it and moving out. I found this exercise very useful, but it's kind of complicated, so allow me to explain. First with the right hand only. We're using hand positions in groups. And we're going to play the first group forwards and backwards, then jump to the next group and play on normally. Here it is in the left hand, but I'm treating the first two hand positions as one, because otherwise we'd just be going back and forth between two notes. And here's another crazy hand distribution for you. It brings the great advantage that in each octave we play the same 4 notes, and I don't need to tell you how much easier that makes things. This is also a good opportunity to show you an exercise I use for distributed hand passage work, meaning any kind of passage work where the hands are sharing a run. Practice hands separately, but lose the gaps, as if it's written each hand separately without waiting for the other hand in between. Aim to do that as smoothly as possible, and then you'll find it an absolute bliss to play with both hands. A lot of people play this glissando by getting louder or faster or both, and I really think that doesn't fit very well here. So here too I use a particular kind of technique. Put your fingers really close together and make them really firm as if they're one solid object and a straight line. And then tilt it slightly, and then brush the keys ever so gently. Here's another very unorthodox hand distribution for you. Ravel he loves doing this to us. He basically has 3 voices or more, and he forces us to decide between either blurring everything properly, or we change the pedal properly and one voice gets cut off. Now most people's solution would be to use something like half pedal, but that's, in my experience, very unpredictable and doesn't really solve the problem. It just gives you 2 half problems instead. But this time we can get around it. Change here while still holding with the right hand. As usual, any questions, please let me know. Take care.